Here at Psych with Mike, we are committed to delivering the best, clinically sound psychology information that we possibly can to our audience. Brett and I have decades of clinical experience as well as educational experience, and we want to make sure that we're able to deliver that to the audience and that always be free. So after 2 years, to be able to take the show to the next level, we are going to open ourselves up to advertising. But before that can happen, we need everybody who hears this message to follow the link that is on the show notes on the podcast page or is on the show notes in the YouTube. Click on that link and fill out a survey that is literally 10 seconds long, so it won't take you more than 10 seconds. Do it right now. I'll wait. Okay, so see, that was really fast and really easy, and it's going to help us to be able to attract advertisers to the show and be able to take the show to the next level. Thanks for listening, and we hope that you enjoy Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. I asked you if you were ready, and you said, yep.
I'm always ready.
You're always ready.
I'm always ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're not only a professional, you're a consummate professional.
That took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about something today that actually is something that I am a really big fan of. The topic is something that I'm a really big fan of, but I also think that it is something that if you are paying attention to the news, and that a lot of times we may think is something that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you had more.
Well, I was just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So we're talking about prosocial behavior versus the concept or topic of altruism. Is there a distinction? Is there a difference? I remember growing up, they didn't use the term prosocial behavior. I was well out of college before I ever ran across that description in some of the sociological literature that I was reading. What I learned was the concept of altruism, which is sacrificing for others, to give to others or for others so that they can be better off. And I was taught in a Christian community growing up as a child that was a goal to work towards, to be someone who serves humanity, and sometimes at your own cost. You know, sometimes you do without so that somebody who has nothing can have something. And that was called altruistic behavior. And I mean, the classic story is the guy that throws himself on the grenade so that the other guys in the foxhole will live. That's an extreme form. And so the question is, well, what would possess somebody to do that? Don't we all want to live? Aren't we all somewhat selfish? Aren't we going to do what's in our own personal best interest all the time? And the answer is not all the time, and not only our personal interests get served. So then there was a book written by a man named Edward Wilson called Sociobiology. He was a professor at Harvard, and he wrote about his theories and the research that he had done about the breeding strategies of animals, mammals in particular, and how societies evolved and developed in response to those breeding strategies. And so sometimes a man will choose not to have children of his own because the community has too many children, and it's more important that the community survive. And so he does what he can to contribute to the community, and his system survives even if his own personal genes don't, which Wilson was concerned about, because he said at some cellular level, you know, our genes want to propagate, we want to replicate, we want to breed and have children, and it's a drive within us to do that. And he said for someone to deny that drive, to choose not to, sets off alarm bells. Why are they doing that? Are they doing that out of extreme personal selfishness? You know, I don't want to spend money on kids because kids cost money.
Yeah.
Kids cost a fortune.
Yeah.
And I don't have to spend that fortune on them. I can spend it on me if I don't have any. And today, in today's society, many, many young adults are saying, I'm not going to have kids. I don't want to have kids. Why not? Well, I want the bigger house. I want the fancier car. I want the trips to Europe. I want the things that I can have if I don't have kids. So maybe Wilson was right.
So this is my theory, and this is why I love the idea of prosocial behavior as
distinct from altruistic. Okay.
Because I believe that everybody always serves their own best interests. I believe that that is innate in human nature, and that it is very difficult for us to not act that way, and that we can't act that way consistently. And so this is what I mean by that. The guy throws himself on the grenade, or Mother Teresa. Those individuals did that for selfish reasons. They did that because if they didn't do it, it was more of a sacrifice for them to not do it. Like, this guy couldn't not throw himself on the grenade, let his buddies get blown up, and then still look at himself in the mirror. So,
but some of that happens so quickly.
Well, sure.
I'm in a car with my wife. We're driving down the road, and a car comes head on towards us, and I instinctively grab her and put her in front of me to save myself.
Okay.
Or I instinctively fall in front of her to try to save her. That's a split-second decision.
Yeah.
You don't think about that. I mean, you may...
But either way, you are serving your own best interests.
As your system understands it in the flash of the immediate moment. Okay.
Absolutely. And so some of us are more intently ingrained to sacrifice ourselves to save others because that's in our best self-interest.
Or because we were raised that way. We were trained from childhood to see the world that way.
I don't know that matters. I just think that you become it becomes so much a part of you that you would rather sacrifice yourself and save someone else. You couldn't live with not doing that. And so you do that instinctively.
For example, when I met my wife, she was young and working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She was supporting herself, living independently of her parents. And even though she was working 2 jobs to try to make enough money to pay her bills, she was still contributing to church and charity. So cash off the table that could have gone for a new rug, could have gone for a case of beer, could have gone for a trip to England. She chumped it into the system to help other people.
But or because if you are a part of that system, then the system is also telling you that whatever you contribute to the church, you're going to get back tenfold. And so that's the
prosperity doctrine?
Well, I mean, whatever you want to call it.
Well, they're prosperity preachers like Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
He says, if you're a good Christian, you'll get a fancy car to drive and watch because God will reward you for being a good Christian.
And, I do believe that. I believe that if you give to causes, whether you're devoutly Christian or not, that there is something
that you yourself.
Yes, that you get something back. For that. Yeah.
Okay.
But regardless, I still believe that people do it for their own internal motivations. I believe that your wife did that because for her, it was easier for her to live giving to the church, giving to those social communities than it was to buy a rug, because if she bought the rug, it would have made her life harder. Even though she would have had the tangible thing, she would not have been as happy with herself.
So what I think you're saying is that it had to do with her own sense of integrity.
Yes.
Her sense of being who she saw herself as being required her to behave in this way.
That's right.
And so if she didn't behave that way, she'd be out of integrity.
Right. And that if we call it altruism, by definition, there can't be an expectation of reciprocity.
Right.
But if we call it prosocial behavior, well, then there can be all the reciprocity you want.
See, I don't like that kind of distinction making. I like the idea of you have to live with integrity to be at peace in your soul.
But with integrity, there can still be reciprocity.
There can be, but that's not the goal of it. It's not like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me.
No, I'm not saying that's the goal. You're not doing it when you're living your integrity. You're not doing it because you expect reciprocity.
Okay. Right.
But it's okay if that happens.
Okay.
If you're doing it altruistically, you can't even allow there to be the expectation of reciprocity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like the fact that we're moving away from altruism, because I don't think altruism is a natural human behavioral pattern. I think that altruism goes against our DNA. We are prosocial. We do things that we live our integrity, and we do things that are good for the community because we are going to get good back from that.
Or we learn to be without integrity.
Yeah.
And then we're in pain and distress,
right,
in ways that we may not recognize.
Absolutely.
Until we have a heart attack, or until there's a car wreck, or we lose our job, or some level of crisis.
Well, I mean, you see the Hallmark stories all the time that, the guy's on his deathbed and realizes, oh my gosh, I've lived my life in a way that has driven my family away from me, and I had all of this wealth, power, and fame, but now at the end of my life, none of that matters because I don't have what's really important.
Right.
Yeah. So you live with integrity, and you're going to get back. And so now
so that prosocial example.
Yeah.
I know a family that belongs to a church, is active in the community, a larger community, not just a church community, good citizens, do things for other people, try to live within the laws. This family had a major health crisis, and the neighbors and members of their church community, members of their local community, brought food for weeks, prepared food to deliver to this house so that these people would have meals, because everybody knew that they were in trouble. And so that was one of the, and that wasn't the reason that they were good citizens. That wasn't the reason they were nice to their neighbors. Is, well, if I ever get sick, they'll feed me.
Right.
It was being nice to the neighbors is being a good citizen and a good neighbor and a good person. So if I live my life as a good person, I have integrity. I feel comfortable about myself. But what may happen is the prosocial benefit that I get from being a good person is people do things for me. People make nice for me, which I think is the argument that you're making.
It is the argument that I'm making. There's also a level of biology.
All right.
So when you engage in prosocial behavior, your levels of oxytocin.
Oxytocin?
Oxytocin, yes.
Well, unless you're like somebody like Rush. No, I won't go there. Yeah, oxytocin.
Oxytocin goes up,
absolutely,
and your levels of cortisol go down.
Yeah.
That just shows where my mind is at. And so there's a biological component also. So when you engage in prosocial behaviors, you feel better. You feel better physiologically. Yeah. And what we know is
which is what I would call living with integrity.
Yeah.
Because if you're out of integrity,
absolutely,
you're out of shape.
Yeah.
You're bent awry.
I agree 100%. And that's why when I always talk to people, I always say you have to know what your yardstick is, how you're measuring your success. If your success is measured by wealth, power, and fame, which is what society tells you are the measures of success, you're going to have a vapid life. You're going to live without integrity, and you're going to suffer because of that. Right. And so guys who run hedge funds and have all the money in the world, and they're flying around the world and living on yachts and whatever, a lot of them aren't happy. I would argue most of them aren't happy.
I would agree with you.
Because they don't have any integrity. Yeah. And so they're living according to what society would say are the measures of success, but they themselves are not living an integral life. They're not living with integrity. They're not living prosocially, and they're going to pay for that.
Yeah.
So let's go to our break, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk more about prosocial behavior.
Okay.
You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Okay, we're back. So you agree then with my basic premise that there is philosophy, there is physiology that is behind what we're talking about.
Yeah, I do.
So to just kind of bring this back into a nutshell, what we're saying, and I'm really glad that you brought the word integrity into it, because that is really that's for me that's really the word that I want to focus on, because that's the word that's important for me. There's a line in Proverbs, a verse in Proverbs, that a man walks in his integrity, his children are blessed after him. And I've always used that as the mantra for my life, that if you live with integrity, that you not only are doing that for you, you're doing that for your children and for prosperity.
Yeah, so working with people clinically, I would regularly have a discussion about the shoulds that they hear in their head. We all have shoulds. We've all been trained to have them. We've been indoctrinated to have them. You should pay your bills. You should not hit your children or your wife. You should, whatever. And yet we have impulses and desires that sometimes are in conflict with those shoulds. I'm walking through a jewelry store and I see a beautiful watch. My id says, hey, take that watch. My ego or superego, my ego says, oh, you'll get arrested. My superego says, you'll go to hell. Yeah. So we learn these shoulds. And I try to make the distinction. I tell people I believe truly it's beneficial if you can make the distinction between what are the have-to shoulds and what are the choose-to shoulds. Because if it's a have-to should, if it's something that you have to do that's externally imposed on you by a system, you may do it, but you'll resent it, and you'll be angry and frustrated because you had to do this. If it's a choose-to should, it comes out of your own personal sense of integrity. In order to be the man I want to be, or the woman I want to be, I'm required to behave this way. I can't separate them. In order to be this person, I have to behave this way. So if that should, if you feel that should, and you respond to that should, you feel good. If you feel the other should, the have to should, and you respond to it, you do what your should tells you have to do, but you'll be angry and resentful and upset. So you'll feel bad. So the difference is in the framing of the should. And so then we start to talk about what are the should messages that the client hears that they're trying to respond to. And what I ask them is, if you can get this in your head this way, then you can ask yourself, is this a have to should or a choose to should? And if it's a choose to should, embrace it, do it. It'll pay off for you. You have good benefits. If it's a have to should, then you either need to reframe it. Is there a way I can redefine this expectation so that I can feel good about doing it? Or I have to take the risk to not do it and to see what results that brings. I may get punished. I may lose my job. I may whatever.
But you have to be willing to pay the consequence.
Yes, you have to be willing to pay the consequence. And if you are, then the stress level that you're experiencing will deteriorate because you aren't trapped in this should world that doesn't have integrity for you.
And so, though, for when people live by those have to shoulds, and there's a lot of resentment.
They're angry. They feel controlled by other people. They don't get to do what they want to do.
But there's also a lot of physiological consequences. Those levels of cortisol are skyrocketing.
Blood pressure, heart attack,
they're going to develop diabetes,
ulcers,
and I mean, all that kind of stuff. So, now that doesn't mean that if you live with integrity for your entire life that you're never going to have a health crisis. We're not trying to say that.
No, we're saying one style of life almost always causes it. The other style of life may occasionally have it.
Right.
But even then, you handle it differently.
Right. Now, so this is something that I have experienced in therapy, is when you are talking to someone who is in their middle or beyond years, and you start to talk to them about, and I don't know that I frame it as eloquently as you do about the have to shoulds and the choose to shoulds, but certainly you've talked to me about that ever since I was in grad school, and so that is
you've internalized,
even though I don't use the same language, is that people, when you present this to them, it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
They say, this makes a lot of sense, but I don't know if I can change.
Right. I don't know if I can give myself permission to not do the have to shit.
Yeah. So
because I anticipate the negative consequence. If I say what I need to say or do what I have the urge to do, my parents may kick me out of the house. My boss may fire me. My wife may leave me.
Right.
Because they're all living this system. And we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago about codependency. You get caught in that codependent trap where you have to behave this way and dance to the music that the family plays in order to survive within the family. And if you choose not to, then the whole family's going to scream and yell and cast you out.
And that's
a
really
huge consequence.
Yeah, that's a really great connection that you just made, is that people who are codependent live their entire existence by those have-to shoulds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they've been taught from childhood, the only way you're going to survive is if you do this. The terror that a child feels if you pull your love and support away from them is intolerable. It's burdensome. It's destructive. And they will do anything to avoid that, so they sell themselves to the have-to should.
So there's obviously a transition period when a person recognizes, I've been living with have-to shoulds, I would like to move towards choose-to shoulds.
Well, that's part of what therapy offers.
Yeah.
And that's the opportunity to learn the distinction and try to make a different choice with deliberation and intelligence.
But what I tell people is, you have to recognize this is going to be hard, and you're not going to feel good while you're making this transition.
Yeah.
And if you think that, this makes a lot of sense to me.
There may be some externally visible costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to be okay with that. It's like when we talk a lot about the victim triangle, Kaufman's victim triangle. Right. And the only way that you can get off of that triangle is to be seen as the bad guy by everybody who's in the system.
Right.
And you have to be okay with that.
You have to know it's going to happen and be okay with that. And the return is...
And even if not be okay with it, you have to know that's going to happen, and you have to tolerate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the return is, we believe, and we advise them, when you get through this, you're going to feel a lot better, and you're not going to have the same level of stress and destruction in your life.
And so the extreme of this is the classic, stereotypical matriarch who's lived by have-to shoulds all of her life. Butter won't melt in her mouth,
right?
But she's miserable, right?
And makes everybody else miserable.
Yeah, and she's always on. She's always the nicest person in the world, but she's miserable, and everybody in the room's miserable. Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's the extreme of what we're talking about. But what she doesn't recognize, and what everybody else in the room doesn't recognize, is if she gave that up, the entire system would actually be better off.
Yeah.
But it's hard to know that.
It's like the clouds would blow away and the sun would come out. Yeah, it's that different.
Yeah, but nobody can see it.
Right.
And even the people who are around that person, they're living their own have-to shoulds.
So it takes an act of faith. And one of the benefits of therapy is it's a timeout from reality. You can sit in my office and imagine those things,
right,
and we can converse about those things, and you can try those things on at no beyond paying my bill, no cost to you.
Right.
It's when you take the show on the road that you encounter the potential costs that you've been afraid of.
Right.
And what we try to do in therapy is make you understand that and build some skills so that you have the strength to do it and to survive it, but with a clear understanding of what the cost might be.
Yeah. And what I tell people is that the only way any system is going to change is through the individual who is the most psychologically flexible.
Yeah.
You have to be the most psychologically flexible in any system to be able to move the system towards change. If you're in my office, you are likely the most psychologically flexible person in the system you operate in.
Or the most vulnerable. It somehow got there.
But I don't know that there's a difference.
So one of the ways that you can teach people to see this pattern and understand this pattern is a book by Eric Berne called Games People Play. And he lays out these theories, and he identifies all the different games that he, like 150, 175 different games that he identified. These are the players, these are the moves, like chess, these are the moves, and this is what the payoff is for each player and how these things are played. And what he says is, if you don't want to be in a game-based relationship, The only way that you can do that is not play. So when somebody invites you to play one of the games and you say, no thanks, I don't play, you frustrate the system, but you are not frustrated.
Right.
And through that window,
If you can tolerate it.
yes,
you can not be frustrated. And that's what that we have to say to our clients is, you are the most psychologically flexible. You're the most likely cog that would cause the machine to change, but you have to recognize what the consequence of that for you is going to be, and not blindly accept it, but at least be able to tolerate it.
well, and that's why if somebody came in for marriage counseling, but one partner won't come, maybe they start, but then they quit. They say, this is not working for me. What you have to tell them is, there's a very good chance that at the end of the day, you're going to get a divorce. This is not going to make it. Not my job to save your marriage. It's my job to help you find the healthiest, happiest answer for you. And so we come back to the shoulds. You know, do you have a religion-based should that says you must stay together no matter what happens? Or do you have a personal integrity sense message that says, I choose to be in this marriage. There are things in it I don't like. There are things in his personality, her personality I don't like. But on balance, I want to be with this person because what we have is worth it to me.
Right.
My children, my home, my relationship with him, except when I'm upset with him, or except when he chews with his mouth open, it drives me crazy. And so maybe I need to find ways to not eat with him every meal so that I'm not exposed to that irritation. So there are skills that I can learn to navigate, but I have to understand that I'm making a choice. And part of what you do in marriage counseling is you try to get each person to say, I'm taking my mask off. This is as much as I'm willing to share with anybody about who I am. This is how I honestly experience myself. If I say to you, this is who I am, can you still choose me? Or do you have to go somewhere else? That's a huge risk, because if I lay it on the table and I say, this is who I am, then my wife has to say, oh, okay, good, I can do that. Or, oh my God, no, I can't do that.
And that's the fear.
And that's the fear. It's the risk, but it's also the answer to healing. Because if you are living honestly and with integrity, you're going to be happier.
And what I say to people is that, if you actually start this process and you change the way that you are engaging, the way that you're playing
yourself.
the game, this other person might not
they experience
like
you
that
differently.
But, so you have to choose whether or not you're going to be in the relationship, or whether or not you're going to even change, because it might be too much for this other person. They might decide they don't want to be in the relationship, but in the end, you're going to be okay no matter what happens. If you're psychologically healthier, you're going to be okay no matter what the result of that is.
Right. Well, it's like the conversation we did about codependency. We talked about the coming out of the dysfunctional family, choosing to go back for a singular event.
Right.
Grandma's funeral, the whole family's coming together. I'm going to see Uncle Joe, and you can choose to do that. You can choose time out from your real life, your healthy life of integrity. Go and be part of the family because you value that enough to pay that price. So I can be around Uncle Joe for the weekend and ignore all this history that we have. And then I can come home and I don't have to be around Uncle Joe anymore. So I can give myself permission to do that. I can be gentle with myself because it's a choose to should, not a have to should.
And can you be gentle enough with yourself to choose not to go?
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that you get healthy enough that you can make that choice too, to say it's too sick, it costs too much, I'm not willing to do it, so I'm not going.
Right.
And Grandma will understand. Wherever she is, she'll know.
Right.
Yeah.
So hopefully that was beneficial for people. As always, we would love it if you would go to the YouTubes and the internet and Apple Podcasts. Like
You're
the
going to
show.
say apple pie.
Apple pie.
Yeah.
They could send us some apple pie.
No, I just thought the litany that you were regurgitating, I thought that was going to be the next one.
Yeah, I like apple pie.
Yeah.
So go on there and give us a like and leave a comment. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.